那刚才呢，听了一小段我们 CAA 总结的最近之间我们义工在全美打选战助选的工作情况。应该说，这些工作对选举来说都是举足轻重的。兰州也不能放弃，摇摆州很重要。兰州像我们华州啊，因为每一位合乎我们理念的候选人的胜出，都是对我们美国立国精神的一种捍卫。所以今天呢，我们邀请的是华州国会第1选区候选人 Jeffery Beeler。Jeffery Beeler 呢，作为共和党的候选人，他主张扶持中产和小企业主，反对政府加税和浪费，在公共安全方面支持法律与秩序，支持警察。在移民政策上呢，反对不设限的开放边境，支持合法移民。在教育方面，他去年是坚决地站在了我们这边，反对华州 I-1000给予某些肤色种族特权的这种做法。华盛顿州第1国会区呢，它包括了 Skagit、Snohomish 郡的绝大部分地区，以及1/3的金郡。该区的东部边缘呢是顿巡郡县，从加拿大、美国边界一直到 I-90 走廊，然后沿着 I-90西行至 West Lake Sammamish， 再从北行至 I-5， 西边界沿着 I-5 走廊向北到 Birmingham， 然后再沿海岸到达加拿大，是相当的一个大的地区，也是华州华人聚居的地区。他非常重视华人社区，主动联系了华人群体，了解选民关心的议题。所以我们今天很高兴呢，可以请到他。Mr. Jeffery Beeler, a Republican candidate, is running for congressman in District 1. Washington's first congressional district includes the majority of Whatcom, Skagit, and Snohomish counties, as well as nearly 1/3 of King County. The eastern edge of the district follows county line from the Canada-US border down to the I-90 corridor. Then it follows I-90 west to West Lake Sammamish, and from there north to I-5. The western border follows the I-5 corridor north to Burlingame, then along the coast to Canada. It is a fairly large area where most Chinese Americans in Washington state live. Let's welcome Mr. Jeffery Beeler. Jeffery, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Thank
Would
you.
you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
I will, and thank you to the Chinese American Alliance for giving me an opportunity to come and sit in your living rooms, as they say, across virtual Zoom. Yeah, just a little bit about myself. I've been a business owner for 32 years. I started a company back when I was 19 years old. And I was working my way through college at the time when I started my business, and didn't realize that I would ultimately love what I do. And 32 years later, a family of 3, or totally, I guess, a family of 5, 3 kids. You know, just getting involved with my community, became a Sultan City Council member. I've been reelected to that 3 times. And then a couple of years ago, of course, when we were, you know, talking about R88, seems like so long ago, but it was just not that long ago. You know, I met your group, your organization, and really got to know kind of a lot of the Chinese Americans in our community. And we found that we had a lot in common. You know, we both agreed that with R88, the affirmative action bill that the state legislature passed, was not a good thing for not only Chinese Americans, but I think for everybody in general, because when we talk about education, we talk about something that when kids go to school, when they go off to college, you know, this is an area where they're supposed to be expanding their knowledge base. They've worked hard through, you know, their K through 12 years. They've earned, you know, the ability to move on, move forward. And we all know what affirmative action would have done to a lot of the Chinese Americans and Asian Americans in general. So through the time that we spent together, we also realized there's a lot of value, family values that we both enjoy and respect. And so just along with everything that we had, it was one of those situations where the partnership we had in 2019, defeating that measure, which I think was the best thing we could have done, was a fantastic thing that we accomplished. And your group, your organization was a lead in that. And I want to say thank you for everything that you guys did there. Now, education, again, that's something I believe it should be fully merit-based. And when we're going and sending our kids off to college, if they've earned their spot to go to the college, that's what they should be getting. They should be given that opportunity. I think it's a failure of our system to be attempting to send kids because of a certain classification to go to college when maybe their strength isn't education. Maybe they haven't had a good time to have those learning skills that college really needs. And so I think we're putting actually kids in a detriment situation where they wouldn't succeed in college because they just don't have those skills. And it leads me back to the K through 12 system that we have in place now. I think our K through 12 system is not living up to what it should be. We've got a system in place where there are kids that are falling behind and failing, and we have school systems, school districts that are not living up to the standards that they should. In fact, with COVID going on, it has even gotten worse. When you hear about the Seattle public schools, less than 50% are actually attending school right now because either one, they don't have access, or two, they're just not, choosing to show up. We've got a failure in the system, and that failure starts at the top, in my opinion. And between the governor and the mayor of the city of Seattle, they're just, I feel that they have not done a service to their community like they were elected to do. Now, my goal going into Congress when it comes to education is to help support legislation that will say, look, when you're educating our children, if we have a failed school, we need to make sure that the money that's provided for that child to be educated follows that child. We need to give more school choice, the ability to say, I want to choose a different school because it's not working for my child. To be able to have more charter schools. I think charter schools are a big benefit because I'm a belief in competition. When you have competition, you increase the demands on the teachers to provide a better education for their kids. That competition raises the level for everybody. And I think that's a great thing we should be concentrating on. So by putting the money with the kid, with the child, and then if they have a failed school, they can take that child to another school and then the money follows them and they have that choice. That's a big benefit to our communities. I'm a homeschooling family. We have 3 children. We have, I call it 1.5 graduated because we've got 1 totally graduated. We've got 1 that is doing kind of the Running Start program at Everett Community College. So he's finishing his diploma, but also getting his AA at the same time. And then my youngest, my daughter, she's just in her senior year this year. But we had the ability in our family to do that, which I am proud of, that we were able to give them the education from home to teach them the things that we felt were important without the distractions of the public school system that are in place now. And that choice is important for us to hold on to. We need to have that choice. So as a person that would go back to Congress, those are the things that I would make sure that I support and make sure we don't lose here in America. I know a lot of people come here because of education. We have some of the best colleges, some of the best universities in the world, and I want to make sure we keep that. Another thing I want to talk about is law and order. We have all seen what this last 9 months basically has done to our communities. It started off with COVID and the coronavirus. And then we had a lot of protests that went on. And in those protests were embedded people who did not like our communities, did not like our country. And they started destroying businesses. These are small business owners that I'm sure many of you are aware of. As a small business owner myself, I understand, what it means to, have things destroyed and taken away from you. And those are the things that I think the leadership here in this country has not done a good job of, which is protecting and providing those safe communities. when they allow for, you know, the violence to continue, for the destruction to continue, and then for the police to be, you know, talked about being defunded. And I'm proud of the fact that, you know, here in Snohomish County in particular, we stood up against, you know, those violence, against Antifa, to say, hey, we don't want that coming here. And the police here have done a good job, and our sheriff here in Snohomish County has done a good job of protecting our communities. In fact, in the city of Solton, one of the things that we've done is we contract with the sheriff. We don't have our own police department. We disbanded it here several years ago. And now we use the Snohomish County Sheriff, you know, to provide our policing services. And we're not interested in defunding. In fact, I defend these police as much as I possibly can. In fact, we give them extra training. So when a police officer, when a sheriff's deputy works in our city, they are actually able to get additional training on top of what the sheriff would provide them regularly. And it's kind of an incentive too, because those deputies, they want to come into our city because they know they're going to get that extra training, and the city pays for it. And I think that is probably the most beneficial of everything. That training goes a long ways in how our deputies and our police officers interact with the community. You know, when they can get to know kids at the high school, we have a high school resource officer. That connection with that high schooler creates relationships and an understanding of what the police are doing. That's one thing I'm just disappointed about that's happened in Seattle. They've actually removed those resource officers. In fact, I had heard that 100% of the resource officers that were in Seattle public schools were all minorities. And so they should be familiar with these police officers. They should be comfortable with them because they can connect even easier with the students in those areas. And by Seattle pulling those resource officers out, I think it was a big detriment to the overall narrative of, you know, police are bad. No, we don't want that. We want to know that the police are good for us. They're going to provide us those safe communities. I've got 2 neighbors that are police officers, and you know, these are great people. They love their communities, and they want to come home to their families at night too, safe. And so that's really important that we talk about that, is making sure that our cities and our country is defended and is safe from, you know, the violence and the people who want to do us harm. One of the things I talk about when it comes to law and order is, if we have no structure because of the lack of law and order, then we don't even have a society. And so we've lost the kind of the bedrock, the foundation of what it is that we have. Now that's different than having authoritarianism. We don't want to be oppressed by our government. That's one of the things we want to make sure we pull back from. We want to make sure that the laws that are put in place don't get in the way of the constitutional rights that we have. We should have the freedoms in this country to do the things that we want to do, like attend the colleges where we want to go, to open up the businesses where we want to open them up, and just to have just that opportunity that America provides, that freedom. Now, protests, I'm 100% behind people here in America who want to protest. I think that is vital. I think that's what created what we have too. In fact, it was Martin Luther King Jr. that talked about, you know, this is the inalienable rights that we have that allow us to make changes, and brought the Black community out of oppression and gave them the civil rights that they, you know, justifiably needed. And when women got the right to vote, again, it was through that protest, that right to do things. That is important that we do, but we have to do it legally. We have to do it without breaking the laws, and we have to make sure that we understand where we're at in society. So these are important things that America provides, and that's one of the things. And when I'm out talking with, you know, people in the district, particularly immigrants, I'm going to talk about immigration. We have a lot of immigrants who've come here over the last, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. In fact, if you think about it, America was built on immigration. You know, 240 years ago, people decided to create this great country, the longest lasting democracy in the world right now. This is important. We have immigration, but as long as it's done legally, that's the great part, because it's the legal opportunity for people to come here and enjoy the benefits of what we have. But many immigrants have stood in line and gone through that process, have paid their debts so that they could come here and live here legally. That's what's important. When you have people undercutting things, cutting in line, as I call it, coming across the border and entering illegally, and then expecting that they're going to be first in line to get their citizenship, that's wrong. We can't have that. In fact, if you ask me, I am a supporter of building the wall. I'm along with this President Trump says, securing our border is the most important part of that. Not just to prevent those who want to undercut things, but the drugs and the human trafficking that we have in this country that is still occurring to this day. Whether it's kids or women, these are the people we need to be protecting. And by not securing our border, we have just given them an opportunity to take advantage of our country. And I think that has been going on. In fact, I've got a short story about how 40 years ago, when I was a kid, I had a neighbor he was Hispanic. And, this kid, he and I got along well. We played a lot. Skin color didn't mean anything to us. But one day I woke up, he and his family were gone. Asked myself what's going on. So I talked to my parents. My mom and dad said to me, well, Jeff, they probably had an immigration system problem and they were probably sent back to Mexico. I was 10 years old. I didn't know what that meant. But let's fast forward 40 years. We still have issues like that happening here in America. And this brings me to another point that's going on in Congress right now. We have people that go back to represent us, to create the laws, to run our country. But it seems like they don't want to fix the things that are important to people's lives, like immigration. Because 40 years later, I'm still seeing immigration problems. So that's one of the things I want to go back and be a part of, to fix, to make America proud of its borders, to give the opportunity for those who want to come here legally, that opportunity to come into the country. But we need to make sure who's coming here is going to do things the right way and provide for themselves, not us providing for them. Another thing I want to talk about is the budget. Right now, America has $27 trillion in debt. And that's just the debt. That doesn't include the fact that we have social programs that are unfunded. In fact, I've heard it's between 80 and 100 trillion dollars that we still have to catch up on in order to fund these things. So the story I want to talk about is 30 years ago when I started my business. 32 years ago when I started my company, I was told, don't plan on Social Security, being there for my retirement. Of course, this is by other business owners who had been in business. So I kind of listened to them. But as time kept ticking and I realized, you're right, I can't count on Social Security. In fact, right now it's going to run out of money in 2035. Again, this is a Congress that doesn't want to get things accomplished. They want to solve the issues that were so important to all of us. And that's why I say it's important for people to go back to DC who understand how it impacts our lives and how it is affecting people when it comes to the lack of making decisions. I'm a planner. As a business owner, I know how important it is to put together a budget and plan for this year, but also plan for 2 years down the road and 5 years down the road and 10 years down the road. Because if you're not thinking long-term, you're always going to be making these quick, hasty decisions. And so I want to get away from that. I want to have a Congress who says, let's plan for, 20 and 40 years down the road, as well as what's happening tomorrow. In fact, in this pandemic, if we had done a better job planning, it wasn't like we didn't know a pandemic was going to hit. We knew at some point in time. In fact, they talked about it. They halfway planned for it, but they never implemented those plans. They never put them into force. They never got behind it. That's why we're struggling the way we are right now, is because we don't have that planning in place. That the person back there that needs to do that, we need to send people who are willing to do that planning. So that's what I want to take back to Washington, D.C., is to make sure that we're planning for, all of Americans, whether they're immigrants or whether they were born here or whether they're about to come here, so that we have a better America. And so I just wanted to say thank you again for allowing me to come in and talk with you guys and open this up to questions and discussions. Anything you guys need to want to ask me, I'm more than happy to go for that.
Sure. I think there are local Washington State residents here with us, and I think they have the questions. I just want to personally thank you so much. Last year, you stood on our side to oppose I-1000, which was the initial initiative gave the preferential treatment to certain races. You put lots of effort. So I'm very happy to talk about that again. You mentioned from the education part, you will ask on the federal level to let the funds to follow the student where they want to go, like the schools or district where they want to go, the funds should follow the students. That's a great idea. I have a question for you. I wonder if you are elected, what would you do to stop some kind of the racist laws, such as Initiative 1000? And this year, California, they have the Prop 16. It's another I-1000. So from the federal level, would you help us to stop these kind of law? Could you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this kind of goes back to just the whole idea of our constitutional rights of not being treated differently. You know, we're all in this together. We're all the same. And I think that's one of the, there's a HR 5, I believe it is, which is what they call the equity bill. And the Democrats want to add more people to this idea of, well, we need to protect this one and we need to protect this one. But if you look at the Constitution, the way it was written, they're already protected. You know, these things are already in place. We can't discriminate. And we should not be looking at the color of their skin or, you know, their religious belief or whatever, you know, silo you want to put somebody in. We're all Americans. We're all individuals. We're all human. You know, you cut us open, we're all going to bleed red. Well, I had a Democrat who said she'd be blue, but that's a different story. But yeah, this whole idea that, you know, we have to be creating these laws, you know, I would go back and I would support resolutions that said, look, we are not to be implementing law that puts one person over another. We need to be equal. That's what it is, equal or equity or equality. You know, those are the things that we are merit-based, how it is we accomplish things. We all have the ability to do it. It's just, you know, we're trying to give some people a leg up when they haven't done the work. And I think that's wrong. So yes, absolutely. When it comes to, you know, supporting resolutions or initiatives or legislation, I am 100% behind it. I've always been one that says, we are all on the same platform. We all have the same abilities to accomplish. That's what's great about America. And that way we can allow those who want to strive to accomplish and to you know, go above and beyond, they get, you know, the rewards of that extra work and not somebody else who wants to cut in line, like I was telling you earlier. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I just want to read one paragraph here from the audience. He wrote, competition is one of the primary American tradition values. Competition is just helping individual students and making them more competitive. Together, a competitive student body, a competitive future workforce will make this country more competitive against international competition, I think. So yeah, I think that's exactly matches your value, what you would advocate for us in the federal level. I have another question for you. Earlier when I tried to explain what or which area is the first congressional district in Washington State, I mentioned there's a majority Chinese American in Washington State live in this district. So personally, I think you care about Chinese community because you came several times to me and to our organization, ask what the voters, especially the Chinese American voters, you know, their concerns, their questions to you. So you want to value these questions and concerns. I wonder, you know, there is a negative stereotype of Asian American in these days, saying we're the model minority, we are very quiet, we don't vote. So in your opinion, in your eyes, how would you value the Chinese community, Chinese American community, especially in your district?
Yeah, you bet. You know, that is one of the things that we talked about back last year, was how quiet, you know, the Chinese American community had been. And when this issue came forward and how it was going to really affect, you know, the Chinese American, the Asian American community so dramatically, because if you take, you know, 30% of a UW population, which is Asian American, and have to reduce those levels because of this affirmative action, that's wrong. Okay. Chinese Americans, we need to remember that every vote is important, and it's good to speak up. I know that when I've been talking here recently, I've been talking with the Vietnamese community, and one of the things that they, you know, talk about is that they keep to themselves, they're quiet, they don't want to cause trouble, but the things that they're seeing happening here right now in America disturb them. They're almost scared that, you know, these protests remind them of what happened where they came from, and they ran away from that. They wanted to come to a country where this didn't happen, basically, and so they would feel safe. This is the type of thing that we're talking about, where it's so important that you get out and you vote, because your vote changes who's in leadership, and who's in leadership directs where the country's going. I talk about how right now down at the state legislature, the Democrats basically have control of the state legislature, the Senate and the House down there, and also the governor's mansion. And through their direction, they've increased taxes, you know, 13 times. They've put out bills like I-1000. They've put out bills like SB 5395, which is the sexualization bill for our kids. And these are going against the values of many, many families, many Asian American, Chinese American, Vietnam American families, you know. These values that they're trying to socially promote things in our public schools. And our public schools aren't for social promotion. They're for education. We should be teaching the sciences. We should be teaching the technologies. We should be teaching the home economics. You know, these are the things that will make our lives better. It's not up to the public school system to be teaching the social values, because every culture, every society has a different social value. You can't be a public education system and allow that to happen. But your vote, you have to remember, is so important, because you determine who gets to make those laws down in Olympia or back in Washington, D.C. Your vote determines that direction. When you see bills coming out that you don't like, think about who's voting for them. In this state, they're Democrats. 100% of the time, it's the Democrats. And in fact, in this last legislative session, it was the Democrats that passed a lot of these bills that we're looking at and shaking our heads. And the Republicans are saying no. And so we need to step up and say, who are we voting for? Is it someone we like, or is it someone that we just don't understand what it is they're doing? Get informed. Make sure you know what it is you're voting for and who you're voting for. Because I think in the past, it's just been, let's just continue voting in who's there because we know who they are. And we don't know who the other person is if they get in and vote. But Democrats are doing things that I don't appreciate. That's why I stood up and said, enough. We need to step up for American values. We need to stop the direction we're going. I don't want to head towards socialism. I don't want to head towards more taxes as a business owner, you know, and as in general, taxes are going across the board. They think, oh, the rich will pay for it, the businesses will pay for it. But they forget, when a business has a new tax, they're just not going to eat it. They're going to pass that on to everybody else. And so new taxes aren't just for the businesses, they affect everybody. So yes, Americans need to remember, regardless of where you come from, to step up, sound your voice. And you guys did that. And it was awesome. I was amazed at what happened last year. And to hear your voices scream so loudly showed me you guys have a voice and you guys have a power unit that you need to take advantage of. When you see something happen in your community, you come together and you make it happen. That's what's important. So thank you, Jessica.
Autonomous.
Thank you. We have a question from, I'm sorry. We have a question from the audience saying this summer in Seattle, protesters created in the heart of the Seattle city called Please Free Autonomous Zone. Apparently the autonomous zone has created a lot of disruption to businesses in Seattle city and Washington state. Anything can the state legislators do to prevent these non-government community from organizing?
Yeah, and again, I think that comes back to, we have a city, the Seattle city mayor, Mayor Dirk and the Seattle City Council down there, who have decided that they're going to bow to, these people who want to take over, and for them to allow to have 6 blocks to be totally taken over, where emergency services couldn't get in, where when people would call 911, they got no response. That's not America. America doesn't let that happen. And I'm disappointed with what happened down there. And I wish there was something more we have to be cautious when it comes to federal authorities coming in and taking over control, because in the United States, one of the most precious things we have is states' rights, which means that each state has the right to run itself within its own borders. And the federal government has to stay back and not react unless asked to come in and respond. But I think that's what happened here, is we don't have the right people in leadership down in Olympia and at the mayor's level there in Seattle to talk about, defending, what is happening. There's going to be some things I think that will come out in some lawsuits that will maybe help change the direction of the decision making down there. It's crazy. They called it the CHOP zone or the Chaz zone. They created the 6 blocks of autonomous. One of the first things they did was they put up a wall, and these people were supposedly against walls. And then they started checking ID when you would come in, and they're against ID. And then the third thing they did is, well, we need help. So they were asking for, things to be brought in, food and water and things of that nature. And it was crazy to watch them work and build what they called their own little autonomous zone in the exact same way that we have here in America, which is we have law and order. We have our boundaries set in place. And we do want to check and make sure that who is here should be here, because that, shows that we have a safe community when we understand who's there. And those people inside those businesses who were being destroyed, and then, we had 2 people die during that period of time too, that were killed inside that zone. And these are all concerning, but it goes back to who's in charge. If we have people in charge who are unwilling to enforce the laws, who want to defund the police, who want to take your rights away like what happened, that's what we get. And we got to stay away from that. So that's why it's important we look at the candidates out there who are willing to step up, and commit to making our community safe. That's what I would like to do for, the 1st Congressional District. Represent this district and say, I will make your community safe.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Let me see if there are any more questions coming. Here's the one. A lot of legislators, including those in Washington state, are promoting socialism ideology. However, many times we can see those people proposing those socialistic legislations have no idea what socialism is. They have no idea the consequences a socialist system would bring to us. How can the country help them? Would it be even possible?
Yeah, we've got, again, a prime example on the city of Seattle's council with Shama Sawant. She's an outright socialist. She wants to implement socialism, in the Seattle city area and across the country, in fact. And then we've got another I call socialist. I think he's referred to himself as a socialist, and Bernie Sanders, who ran for president in this country. We've got another congressional congresswoman over in the 7th congressional district by the name of Jayapal. She's also implementing and want to push this country towards socialism. And that's one of the great things that I have learned over the last, I tell people I've been campaigning for 2 years, basically. I ran a race in 2018 as a setup for 2020 to get out in the community. It takes a while to get to know people. And when I would talk to immigrants, again, about their stories of how they came here, why they came here, and the things that they're seeing that are scaring them, this slow approach to socialism. In fact, it was Khrushchev that talked about how, he wasn't going to have to conquer the United States from the outside. He was going to do it from the inside. And it's that frog in a pot of water that they slowly turn the heat up on. You don't feel it happening. They implement things like, let's have Medicare for all. Let's expand our welfare programs. Let's start giving out, monthly stipends to people to live on. Just this slow progression of, the socialization of things. What they're not realizing is every time they have one of those programs implemented, it's taking away some of your rights. It's taking away a little bit of your constitutional freedoms. And so that frog is slowly being turned up, on the heat. And pretty soon that frog's going to be boiled. And that's when Khrushchev says, that's when I'll have you, because your socialism will become our communism. So we need to make sure that when we're looking at candidates, what is behind their scene? What is it that they're promoting? And is it heading towards socialism? Then we need to make sure we elect them out of office and elect somebody in place who won't go that direction. That is the most important thing. So when you hear these programs, think about, what are they talking about? Where's the money coming from? And what is the long-term result going to be? So yeah, socialism is something we want to stay away from. This country is such a great opportunity. We have such great freedoms here. We create competition. As a business owner, I love competition. It makes me better. It makes businesses better by that, creating a little bit better gadget, a little bit better service. You earn that extra money because you're looked at as somebody that they're going to go to. So that's what I think is so important here. So we need to hold on to that and keep in mind what it is we're doing. So.
Sure. I think our community is very sensitive to socialism, because otherwise we will not come to United States. We're coming to Britain, not for socialism. Otherwise we stay in our own country. I mean, a pretty country. So what I know is you have a strong opponent, Susan, right? Susan
Del Bene.
Yeah, Del Bene. She's in that position for seven years. Yep. She's quite strong. So can you talk about your strengths compared to Susan, to voters? Could you explain how could you win? What's your campaign strategy this year to win Susan in our district?
You bet. Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of the wonder of all this is, for 2 years, I've really gotten to understand what she is all about. I've been studying her, the things that she supports. Let's first start talking about, she talks about she has a degree in business management. If you've got a degree in business management and you've supposedly ran a large .com company back many years ago, and yet you go back to Congress and you continue to spend above your means, above the revenues. When you put a budget together, you have revenues and you have expenses. And in business school, they teach you your budget has to have those equal each other out. Otherwise, you're not running your business right. Well, if she's got this great degree, she sure doesn't know how to run a country with it. Number two, one of the things that I have learned about her is when she was part of Microsoft, she was part of their mobility business back in 2004 to 2007 or 8. I can't remember which year it is. But during that time, Windows Mobility was your Windows Phone. Microsoft was on the cutting edge when smartphones were coming out. So they thought they had a great product, and they stuck Susan Del Bene in charge of that product. What do we know about the Windows Phone? It's dead. It died a long time ago, and it went nowhere. And again, a person who claims they have business skills, sure, if you're handed a ton of money, you can run something into the ground, It's that ability to run a successful business. And that's what I've done for 32 years. I've run a successful business. I've created profit. I've had a family. My wife is able to stay home, and we're able to raise our children with homeschooling and still have the ability to, do the things that we want to do. Now, am I ultra rich? Absolutely not. I am not a multimillionaire in any sense, but I am very comfortable, and I'm striving the way I want, and I'm accomplishing, and I'm successful. I took that to the city council. And let me tell you a little bit about the city council. In 2007 and 8, when we were going through that recession, the city council reached out to the community, and I was one of the ones that got onto a panel that fixed the budget during that time without having to raise taxes and without having to lay off any employees. We just found places to cut, like a good person who knows how to run a budget does. When I got onto city council in 2009, one of the things that we did is we teamed up on the council and we implemented policies on the budget side, so that today, in the middle of a pandemic, when you hear other cities and other states crying, my budget's falling apart, our city administrator last month told us we're in the best position financially than we have ever, I underscore ever, been, because we've planned for things. And again, it goes back to that planning. It's like people back in Congress don't want to plan for things. They want things to fall apart and then be there to help pick it all up and fix it. Unfortunately, that's not the way you run a business. Now, the other thing is, she is a co-chair of the Congressional Aluminum Caucus. And what does that mean? Well, there are aluminum smelters all over the country. I shouldn't say all over, there's 7 of them. Well, now there's only 6, because one of the aluminum smelters in this district, which was up in Ferndale, Washington, up there by Bellingham, it just closed. We lost 700 jobs in July. And she's one of the co-chairs of the Aluminum Caucus, the people in charge in the federal government that are supposed to watch over and keep these companies safe. But what happened was, we had so much Chinese imports coming into America for the aluminum processors over there that American companies couldn't compete. And her 7 years of time, she did nothing to slow down those imports, those cheap imports that undercut our jobs. And that's the thing that I go back to. If she is not out there supporting American jobs, if she's not out there supporting Americans and making sure that we have the ability to compete not only nationally, but globally, she's not doing her job. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to go back there and say, let's keep American jobs. Let's focus on Americans. Let's make sure we keep those high-paying, those good for family wage living jobs here in America, because that's what our job is to do. So those are the things that she has not done, and those are the things that I want to go back and do for us, as well as, like you said, the Chinese American community who has stepped up and done what they've done. Those are the people I want to represent, who I feel have been forgotten in all of this.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I think when you serve for the city council, I think you get part of the job is to try to balance the budget and make sure the government is not wasting the money and keep the budget meet, even the economic status not so ideal. Would you talk about this kind of experience? I think that will contribute to your future work if you elected as a congressional man. So would you talk about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so as she was saying there, the city council, our job is to manage the revenue that comes in, that's the taxes that come in, and the assets of the city, to make sure that we're not wasting money, to make sure that what we're doing is providing the services that we tell you we're going to give away, and also to the assets of the city. Like in the city of Sultan, we run a sewer system, we run a we used to run a garbage. We're still in the garbage business, but we're just about ready to get out of it. And I'll explain that here in a second. We run a water district as well as we run our, city government. And it's important that when you have a sewer system and a water system and you manage the assets well, it means you're keeping up on them, you're maintaining them, and you're planning for future. See, that's the key in all this, planning. I can't say it enough. If we don't plan for the future, you're going to fail. And so those are the things that we're looking at. Like we're planning for our water system and our sewer system to incorporate all the new growth that we're having. But we're not just looking for tomorrow or next year, we're looking for 20 years down the road. So that when we start building these systems and upgrading these systems, it's important we take into consideration there will be growth. And how do we accommodate that now, but don't break the bank, and at the same time for the future? Set in place plans that we know in 5 years we'll have to add this to the system, or in 10 years we're going to have to change things because environmentally things will probably change. So it's making sure that we're keeping on top of things like that. And then making sure that we're not also, constantly, adding this tax to businesses or throwing that tax onto our constituents, because those tax dollars come out of people's personal budgets. And I know for my personal budget, when we hit the COVID thing and all of a sudden I was shut off from my revenue stream for, 2 or 3 weeks, it means a lot when you want to go pay those monthly bills. That budget you have to plan for. And then, going through the month of April, only working at 25% of what are gauging for. I had to go back to my budget and redo it and figure out how do I trim around those edges to accommodate the fact I have less revenue, as well as I couldn't hire on people like I wanted to too. I was in the process of 2020 when I entered in January, looking at expanding and having one of the best businesses I had ever had in an annual basis. And then that hit. So taking that knowledge, that experience of looking at budgets and planning down the road, and then when something happens, which we did at the city, we back here in August, we sat down with the budget and said, we're in a great place, but what happens if this continues on for another 6 months or a year or 2 years? How do we manage it so that we can make it through for that period of time? And then when we get to a place where we flip that switch and we're back, we've got the vaccine, or we've got the ability to take care of this virus, and we understand it, and we can flip that switch and the revenue start generating again, then go back to the budget and say, okay, now we've made those adjustments, and now let's plan again for the next step. It's always looking at things and preparing and planning for it. That's what's so vitally important when we're talking about any sort of revenue budget stream. That's what I want to take back to Congress and say, instead of spending $800 billion, or unfortunately this year it's $3 trillion more than we have in the budget, and it's still growing, how do we change it so we don't do that anymore? That's what I want to go back there and fix.
Great. I think you have lots of experience on that, so we can rely on you on that part. We do have audience, Alan. There's a question for you. The audience is asking, how do you protect Chinese Americans' rights due to China and U.S. relationship? I think he's talking about lately China and the U.S., their relationship is not smooth as what they have in the past. So Chinese American living U.S., we kind of wonder what would you do to protect us or to be the advocate for us for our rights here?
So I don't know if he's talking about Chinese Americans who have immigrated and have gotten their citizenship, or those who have green cards or here on work visas.
We're talking about the legal Chinese Americans. You probably know because coronavirus, China government and Chinese government and American government, they have kind of back forth, blaming each other, complaining where the virus came from. So there are lots of conflicts, and lots of Chinese Americans kind of worried if the relationship between China and the U.S., getting worse, how would you protect us if you are
bet.
selected? Yeah.
Okay. This is a little bit of a concern because of the back and forth that is going on. It's one of the things about our president that I'm not as fond of. He can be very inflammatory when he talks about things. And one of the things I wish he would sometimes do is, do less tweeting and do a little more listening. As my mom always told me, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Okay. So that's, I think, is one of the key ways we can actually get through this, which is we need to start listening more to each other and understand that globally we're all in this together. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we have a fair and even playing field when it comes to trade, when it comes to being able to travel back and forth. These are things that are important to not only Chinese Americans who live here, but Chinese and Americans who want to go there to conduct business. I think ultimately, once we get through, this election cycle, I'm confident that President Trump will be reelected, and he's going to take what he has already started and finish it finally. I think it's in limbo right now. I think there's a lot of question marks, but I think once he's reelected and China is able to sit down with the leadership there and him and finish up these negotiations to get trade back to normal again, I don't think there will be as much concern about what is happening between the two countries. Because I know there's probably a lot of you who still have family back there, and this is, if I had, my grandparents were from Switzerland, and so we have family back in Switzerland. If there was a trade war going on, I would be concerned too. Can I travel there? Would I feel safe? Would the Swiss government let me come back? Because I call this home. So absolutely, I see what it is that the concerns are. The things I would do would just be to encourage this president to get the trade talks moving, to continue down that road of evening the playing field. And I would be a voice of reason back there to say, look, we have these communities that we need to make sure we protect, and they don't want to be living in fear, and we need to make sure that they don't have to do that. So that's what I would do. I'd bring that voice of reason, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah, the reason. Sorry. Yeah, the reason I'm asking this question because I believe that this laboratory made the virus by the China Communist Party. So I'm concerned, in the like a World War II, like 70 years ago, the Japan government do something wrong to this world, and finally the Japanese Americans, they got discrimination from the country. So this I'm afraid about, I want to, take down the China Communist Party, but after that, we may receive the discrimination from this world, especially Americans. So this is a concern,
Sure, and I hope America learned a lesson from World War II. That's kind of what was talked about. If you don't look at history, you will bound to repeat it. And I hope we can look back at history and say what happened in World War II does not repeat itself. We need to treat Chinese Americans as if there's no color difference here. We're all human. We're all Americans in this together. You guys came to America for a reason, to have that opportunity. You've engaged in the American life. You've engaged into business. You've disseminated yourselves into the United States because this is where you want to be. I mean, it wouldn't make sense for you to be here if you didn't want to be here. And we need to make sure that those voices are not pushed out, and we don't open up internment camps and set you aside just in case. You guys are Americans to me. And so that's the voice that I would be, is we should not be oppressing anybody, whether they're Chinese American, Vietnamese American, Saudi Arabian American. You've come here for a reason, and you're part of our community, and you're there to help defend what you came here for, was that freedom and opportunity. And so I'd be proud to stand next to a Chinese American any day, because I consider them, we're the same.
Thank you. I think American is called melting pot. That's what I heard
Yes.
back long time ago when I was in China. So when we came here, we got citizen. We want to be treated as Americans, not Chinese anymore. Because we all live here. My kids were born here. It's kind of it hurts our heart if we were taken as Chinese, not Americans. I think
Yeah,
that's
the Chinese they are innocent. The Chinese they are innocent, and the Chinese Americans too. So recently, this is only one, I concern because Trump always saying like China virus, China virus. I really hope like one day, he said the China Communist Party virus, and you guys can separate like China Communist Party and the Chinese America all Chinese. So this is really important for us. For the Americans, sometimes they don't know like who are Chinese, who are Japanese. They are the same. The Chinese Americans looks the same as the Chinese. This is
Yes.
what I concern only. Yeah. So I hope
No.
like you guys can separate the Chinese Communist Party with us, especially in the social media. And right now, the Twitter or Facebook, they try to hide the truth, and they don't let us to bring out and speak up to the world. This is one which I concerned. Thank you, but thank you for repeating.
Yeah. No, I like what you just said. I have never had it explained to me like that before, and that's correct. The CCP is the one who is, responsible for this. It's not the Chinese. The people in China, they're just living their lives. The people in Wuhan were just living their lives, trying to make it from day to day. And this was a virus that was, I'm sure at some point we'll be able to figure out where it came from, how it came from. And ultimately, if the CCP was the ones that were responsible, that's how we need to talk, because the Chinese people did not do this to America or to the world. And I think that's the concern you're showing me, which is we want to make sure that we understand when we look at somebody who is Chinese, that it's not their fault. And people who are attacked on the street because of their, cultural differences, it's wrong. And we need to say as Americans to stand up, that person needs to go to jail because what they did was wrong. So you're absolutely right. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Alan, to make the point very clear. And Jeffrey, if this is the first time for you to hear this point of view, CCP is different as Chinese people, I guess lots of American people or lots of legislators, they don't know that. They never heard about it. Would you please pass this message to the people, the American people, let them know this point of view? I think it's kind of important.
Yeah, no, and I agree with what you're saying there. And I've always considered that the Chinese people themselves living under Chinese rule are not the ones to blame. It is CCP. I like, is Alan that said that? Alan, I appreciate how you were able to explain it, because we shouldn't call this the Chinese virus, like you said. We should call it the Chinese Communist Party virus, so that we make a distinguish between what it is we're talking about. Right now, I still call it COVID-19. That's its real name, okay? Yeah. I'm not gonna call it the Chinese, I'm not calling it the Chinese virus, because until we actually figure out where it came from, that's one of the things that I like about what I do. I'm not reactive. I don't react when something happens. I will wait to get the evidence, to get the facts out there and find out what really truly happened. And then I'll come out and say, this is what I feel is right and wrong. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jeffrey. We're supposed to keep it in half an hour, but with lots of questions, we're now almost 7:30. Would you please, time passed quickly. Would you please just let us know what's your official website? So if people want to support you, want to donate, and want to find you, ask more questions, they can find you, they can reach you.
Absolutely. So my website is beelerforcongress.org, and that's BEELER, the number 4, congress.org. I also have the .com, so if you'd accidentally type that in, it goes right to my page anyway. You can also follow me on Twitter at Beeler for Congress, spelled the same way. I'm on Facebook, Beeler for Congress, and that one, I think you can do both the FOR as well as the number 4, Beeler. It's actually Jeffery Beeler for Congress. Instagram, Beeler for Congress. What else is out there? They're all out there. I don't like social media, and so when I was told, you're running as a politician, you have to have these things, it's like, oh no. But yeah, and what's really important here is that we make sure we get the message out that we really want truly somebody to go back there who wants to plan for America's future, who doesn't have a knee-jerk reaction when things happen, and somebody who wants to represent the whole community, not just parts of it, not just the ones that are on my side. I want to represent the whole community, because I think we've lost that in a lot of politicians, and I know we've lost this with our current representative. Ultimately, she's a multi-millionaire, and I'm already starting to see a lot of things being thrown at me from her side, and we're fighting back with what we got. But if any of you could also contribute to the campaign, every dollar we use as a businessman will be used efficiently and wisely. And so we always ask, reach out to my page. There's a donate button. You can click that. I'd appreciate that. Any other questions, you can go to my contact page, click on that tab, fill in the information. I'd love to answer your questions. In fact, as a representative, that's my job. To represent you, you need to be able to get a hold of me. So there's my website. Thank you guys for allowing me an opportunity to come in and have a discussion. And Jessica, thank you for keeping in touch. I'm glad you're doing well with your new little baby.
You're very welcome. I want to say you don't have to be in the 1st congressional district in Washington state to help Jeffery to win, because you can donate, and also this position is a federal level, so he can help. If he wins, he can help all of us nationwide. And we do have our audience have the last question for you, Jeffery. Okay. He just say, how can we help him to win? Because I'm in 1st district. I think except donation, there are lots of things, they can help you. Just name several.
So we do sign waving several times a week, where we stand out on the corners, and wave the signs. And I typically am with, a lot of other candidates, like the Kolb campaign, or when I'm in a specific legislative district, like in Bothell, I will sign wave with the LD1s that are there too, those candidates. So sign waving is important, because the more people we have showing support, the more people go, wow, they've got a lot of support, and they'll vote. Another thing you can do is we've got our caller system up and running, where you can download the Red Dialer app, and from your living room chair or your bed, if you want, you can make phone calls to reach out to voters to say, please vote for Jeffery Beeler. You can also do, like I said, donations and phone calls, sign waving. If you want to have an opportunity to meet me in person, I love meeting people in person. Even under COVID, we can still have, great conversations in small groups. We love to do that. I've been in big groups out in the open, but of course it's raining now. So it's not as easy to play outside, but those are some of the things that we can, certainly love the opportunity to have you join the campaign. Writing letters to the editor, that's another thing we can do. You can write a letter to your local newspaper and say, we want Jeffery Beeler to be elected, and here's why, from your perspective. That goes a long way when people read those in the newsletters, the newspapers. And just whatever you can do, reach out to us. We can put you to work. Go to my website, fill in the information, and we'd love to have you join our team.
Right. Let more people know Jeffery Beeler, and he's really care about his voters. So he always talking about outreach. How can I let more people to know me and let me know them, understand their concerns, understand their difficulties, their lives. So wonderful candidate, please try to get on his website and follow his Facebook, whatever social media, and do whatever you can do to help him win. Thank you so much, Jeffery. It's nice to have you today.
Thank you, and thank you to the Chinese American Alliance for allowing me the opportunity. And I'd love to hear from you guys, so reach out.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.